also, AWS drives growth for Web3 companies in a variety of ways. We do that with infrastructure. We have the most scalable, the most efficient cloud infrastructure. We also support them with go-to-market strategies. We have over 100,000 partners in over 150 countries that are able to work with you to enable you achieve your vision for your product. We also provide world-class security to builders, and we provide support with compliance requirements. So let's look at the building blocks for Web3 and blockchain companies on AWS. Okay, so I'll start with the very base, which is the core compute and infrastructure. So if you are building on AWS, you may decide, right, to use the regular traditional servers, instances, compute, right? You may also decide to build with serverless infrastructure, or you may decide to build with containers. So this is the core compute infrastructure. For security, we have a wide plethora of services available to secure what you're building. We have the AWS Nitro Enclaves, okay? Has anyone ever heard that word, Nitro Enclaves? Okay, I'll tell you what it is. Because building for Web3, building for blockchain requires stringent security requirement, right? AWS provides Nitro Enclaves so that you can build in an isolated compute environment. So Nitro Enclaves provides compute infrastructures that has security built in at the chip level, not just on the infrastructure, at the very base of the microprocessor. So it's an isolated infrastructure that continuously monitors, continuously reviews the infrastructure, underlying infrastructure for vulnerabilities, and helps to reduce the attack surface. Then we have a lot of storage services from AWS, storage services like the Amazon S3. This is an interesting one. Let me tell you something about the Amazon S3. Amazon S3 is the most scalable way, most durable way, most secure way to store your documents. So Amazon S3 has 11 nines of durability. What does that mean? It has 99.9999911 times, 11 nines, percent of durability. So what does that mean for you? It means that if you have 10 million documents, right, it means that there's a chance that you might incur a loss of about one file out of 10 million documents in 10,000 years. Are you processing that? 11 nines of durability for S3 for storing your document means that if you have 10 million documents, it means that there's a chance that you can incur a loss of about a document out of the 10 million documents once in about 10,000 years. And beyond the S3, we have other services. We have block storage service, EBS, and we have others for databases. For those who are used to traditional development, you only think of SQL databases. But if you're building Web3 products and services, then you should think of other available services like the document database built on MongoDB. You should think of NoSQL database, Amazon DynamoDB, and we have observability services. You need to ensure that you have the right metrics, you're monitoring your logs, you have the ability to trace what's happening across your development workloads. Yes, for those who don't understand what observability is, for you to build resilient architectures, right? You need to know exactly what's happening behind the scenes. So you should be able to define metrics. You should be able to have access to logs. know exactly what's happening in the underlying services. And then you should also be able to trace, the underlying services to know if there are issues. For instance, across your APIs and calls and all of that, you might have some latency issues. So it's good to be able to trace and know exactly where issues exist. So let's move on and look at some solutions from AWS for Web3 use cases. So I'll start with the first one, hosting a blockchain node on AWS. So blockchain nodes are very critical to the blockchain infrastructure, especially for layer 1 and layer 2 networks. Blockchain nodes help to secure and sustain blockchain network by helping to have a copy of the ledger. And beyond having a copy of the ledger, you can use it for functions such as what? Validations of transaction, right? Your nodes may also be useful for services, for activities such as staking, for on-chain analytics, and for lower latency use cases. So this is one of the things you can do on AWS. This is just one use case. Another use case is securing your blockchain key management with Nitro enclaves. I just spoke about Nitro enclaves. There are situations where you require elevated security. For instance, depending on what you're building, you may be building a custodial wallet or a wallet as a service product, and you need extra layer of security, right? So you can have Nitro enclaves, which embeds security at the chip level so that you can have continuous monitoring, continuous review of the underlying infrastructure to ensure that the attack surface is reduced. Then you can also have the serverless option, unlike running on traditional or regular servers and instances where you have to manage operations around the server, operations like patching the server, operations like ensuring that the security requirements on the server is up to date. If you don't want to participate in all of those, then you can have serverless options. What does that give you? What's the difference between serverless and the regular type of instance? So, well, serverless may sound as if there's no server. It actually means there's a server. However, you are not managing that. AWS is managing that for you. And, beyond AWS managing the server resources for you, serverless presents other advantages like automated fault tolerance. So, for instance, if the servers are down, you don't need to configure new servers. The servers can automatically scale. And the good one, pay as you go. Rather than you paying for the whole of the server, you only pay for what you need and for when you use it. Then, the interesting thing about data, it's a data-driven world. And I can tell you that off-chain data is as important as on-chain data. For Web3 startups, for blockchain companies, there's a need to ensure you manage your data effectively at scale. When you manage your data very well, you're able to get insight from those data. You can even harness data to have predictions on possibilities for your product. So AWS enables you to index, manage, and process large volumes of data securely and cost effectively. So AWS supports a variety of Web3 companies like crypto exchanges like Binance, Coinbase, DeFi, CeFi providers like 1inch and the likes. So AWS supports you regardless of your product, be it at an early stage or at a mature stage. Then let's see some examples of some of the companies we work with. I'll start with Coinbase. Coinbase is one of the top crypto exchanges in the world, and they run on AWS. At a point, they wanted to secure their workload, especially their transactions, respect to fraud management, right? And they wanted to automatically review the KYC information of their customers. And they discussed with AWS, and they relied on the service called AWS SageMaker, which is a machine learning platform from AWS, and they were able to build a custom online ID authentication service, which automatically reviews the ID information of their customers and validates it. The second example I have here is Crypto.com. Crypto.com is an Hong Kong-based crypto platform, and they have over 5 million customers, right? And they especially pay attention to security. And one of the proof that they optimize, they prioritize security is because they are the first crypto exchange in the world to obtain ISO 27001 and ISO 27701 certifications. And they have all requisite compliance requirements from global bodies. So they worked with AWS on their security and their scalability. So for their scalability, because of the number of customers they have, they usually experience spikes, a lot of spikes in transaction requests, transaction processing. And using AWS services, they were able to introduce resiliency and scalability into their operations. So let's speak about AWS Ledger Services. So we've been speaking about general services from AWS that empowers, that helps Web3 builders, blockchain builders to accelerate their journey. Now we'll be looking at services specially focused on blockchain. So let's see how that works. So we'll be analyzing it on the basis of centralized versus decentralized. So what is centralized offerings? A centralized product, right, as a single trusted authority. And I'll explain. If you're a startup, right, and you are building a credit register, then you are the single trusted authority, right? That is an example on a distributed ledger. That is an example of a centralized product, because the product you are building, right, is yours, and you want to maintain your authority on the product, right? You can have others onboarding, signing onto your credit register, but then you don't want them to kick you out, right? Unlike if you have a decentralized product. You can see the diagram for a decentralized product. You have joint ownership by multiple parties, right? So any of the parties can technically kick you out of the network. Then decentralized platforms product removes intermediaries, right? So you enable multiple parties to transact transparently. And we'll see how AWS addresses all of these situations. So for the centralized, so if you are building the centralized products, you have a product from AWS called the Amazon QLDB. So is that a familiar word for anybody? Amazon QLDB. Okay, so I'll tell you more about it. It's an interesting product, actually. And for those building decentralized product and services, then you can rely on the Amazon managed blockchain. So let's dive deep into the centralized offering, the Amazon QLDB, and see how it works. So what is Amazon QLDB? So I gave the example, right, of building a credit register. So for me, I see a problem with credit registers, and this is a problem. Fintechs and payment companies make decisions based on credit registers. And then they really need to be certain that the information they are making decisions on is correct, right? But then what proof do I have that none of the information has been tampered with? How can I even prove, that the information coming from the credit register is absolutely correct? How do I even see the log of changes, the log of corrections, in the log of the history of changes, to the data stored in a credit registry, for example? So if I have a use case where it is absolutely important, right, for me to see the log of changes, to see exactly what has happened to all of the data in a credit register, then I'll be using a centralized ledger offering from AWS called Amazon QLDB. So what advantage does Amazon QLDB give me? Allows me to have an immutable ledger. What does that mean? So I'll have something like a blockchain, right, where I can see history of all the data. Even if the data needs to be changed, I can see all the log. Nothing can be changed technically. And then we have cryptographic verification. So if you need to bring the big four auditing companies to look at it, they can verify it cryptographically that nothing has been changed. The same way you can go to your credit registry where you have your data written on regular databases, SQL Server, MySQL. You really have no proof that the underlying data has not been tampered with. I mean, you are just accepting what they are giving you, right? But in this use case, because it has cryptographic verification, I have that proof that the data is what it is. And then it is highly scalable beyond even what regularly blockchain offerings can do. And QLDB is easy to use. QLDB, so the DB sounds like a database, right? Yes, and it's a database, meaning that you can use your familiar SQL statements on Amazon QLDB. And you have your regular ACID transaction requirement for databases. And it's a journal, it's a ledger, so you have the benefits of your regular database. You have your ease of use of regular databases. And you have the advantage of having that immutability feature of blockchains. And it's centralized, meaning that if you as the builder, you as a startup, you want that level of control, you want to be the central authority, then you can be. You can technically have your cake and eat it. And the Amazon QLDB is an append-only database, means that you only keep appending. Even if you need to update anything, you update through appending. And the full history, the full log is retained. And there are two kind of products you can build with Amazon QLDB. You can have ledgers with centralized trust I already gave you an example of the credit history. So for ledgers with centralized trust, you can have use cases like for healthcare, where you want to have log of history of visits to the hospital, health record basically. You can have vehicle registration, or for manufacturers who want to have that provenance. You want to track products, for instance. If you want to pick, let's say, I want to pick an egg, right? And I'm able to scan a barcode that gives me the full history of that egg, the kind of chicken that laid the egg, the feed that the chicken ate, whether organic, inorganic, grains, whatever. That proof, if it's on QLDB, because of the cryptographic verification that's inherent in it, and because of the immutability, we can have full trust in the data we are obtaining, as opposed to seeing the history of that egg on your regular SQL server that anyone can tamper with, right? And let's see the other use case, transactions with decentralized costs. So for financial institutions, like the example I earlier gave you on credit history, or for mortgage lenders, you have history about a property, about when the property was last renovated, electricity, infrastructure, and all of that. If it's on Amazon QLDB, you know that it is immutable, it is always there, no one can tamper with it, and for supply chain as well. So if you have supply chain product offerings that you're thinking of building, this is an option for you, and for retail. And I'll give you an example of a company that's built on QLDB, the popular BMW. They needed a trusted, verifiable ledger to track automotive data, in order to get full transparency on transactions across multiple entities. So you want to buy a used car, you want to see the full history of that car. When I say full history, you want to know how many times that car has gone to the filling station to get fuel, right? That level of detail. You want to see visit to the garage. You want to see, the body parts that have been replaced, the full history, yes. So that was the use case BMW worked on. And they built the product which they call the BMW Digital Vehicle Passport App, which provides a transparent and complete history of vehicle data. And they built it with Amazon QLDB. And it provides verified data for them. And by building on QLDB, they are able to see, the full history. And, the history includes car repair, visit to the car wash, changes to the tires of the car. And I'm asking you, so if there are two types of apps, so this question is to you, if you are to buy a second-hand car, right, and there are two startups providing second-hand cars, if startup A is telling you that, they have the full history, it's on SQL Server or MySQL, and there's the other startup building with QLDB. So the question to you, which of the app will you go for, A or B? QLDB. Why? Because the data is immutable. What you see is what you get. It's the real deal. No one can tamper with it, no one can change it, so it's very similar to your regular blockchain. However, the only difference is that there is no central authority. Since you are the builder, you are the central authority, no one can kick you out, right? So let's see what happens with a regular blockchain. So at Amazon, we also have the Amazon managed blockchain, right? And I'm sure you know what obtains. Unlike what we had the other time, Amazon managed blockchains help you build decentralized applications, right? So this is a fully managed service. Makes it easy to create your blockchain networks without worrying about the underlying server resources, network, or storage resources. And we have two variants, Ethereum network and Hyperledger Fabric network. So the properties are also very similar to what we had with Amazon QLDB. However, the key difference is that it is decentralized, so we practice democracy here. You can have people voting on how they want to move the product, the platform forward, and it gives you that immutability of blockchain networks, low cost, and you can integrate it to other services as well. So it's very easy to get started. You subscribe, you create a network, invite members, and you add necessary information, and you deploy. So, question of ownership. Decentralized or centralized versus decentralized. For centralized products, you are the full authority on that platform. Remember, no one can kick you off. But if you are creating a decentralized platform, right? I mean, depending on the number of votes you have, the participant on the network can actually vote to kick you off or to change the rules. I'm sure we understand this. So now let's get very techy. So we started by reviewing the core services from AWS that empowers builders, that empowers Web3 blockchain builders. Now we also reviewed this very specific blockchain Web3 offerings from AWS, Amazon QLDB, and Amazon Managed Blockchain. Now we'll be doing a bit of technical architecture review. So we pick a use case and look at what we used to typically build, right? And I hope this helps you to accelerate your Web3 journey with AWS. Let's see how that works. So we have a DApp, a decentralized application, which has a lot of features. We have the user interface. We have the asset storage for static data. We have the API layer. We have requirement for off-chain database analytics, AI, ML predictions, and all. We have asynchronous events management. We have integration with blockchain nodes. We have transaction manager and an admin wallet, which ultimately interfaces with the public Ethereum contracts and wallets. So let's see how you can build if you have this kind of requirements and you have to build with AWS. We'll consider some of the AWS services that can enable you to build this kind of platform, this kind of product. So let's see how that works. So for the user interface, you can use several services actually, but for the purpose of this discussion, I'm considering Amazon CloudFront and S3. So why CloudFront? CloudFront because CloudFront is a scalable CDN, content delivery network. What does that mean? So if you have static content, right, on your mobile app, you don't want every of your users to pick up those documents, those objects from your origin server. For each call, there may be latency concerns and all. So the best practice recommended architecture is that you should have those documents in a repository, which is a CDN, so that everyone who needs it can obtain it from that CDN, as opposed to everyone pulling from the source server. This is more resilient, this is more robust, and gives improvement on latency. So you have edge servers all across the world as your users are moving from Kenya to Nigeria to Ghana to the UK, traveling. They can always interact with the closest edge service, as opposed to getting those static resources from your single server where they are located. You can always pick from the closest edge services. And this kind of architecture is enabled by Amazon CloudFront. And you have S3 to store your static resources. Remember what I mentioned about S3? It has the 11 nines of durability, right? Remember that. So let's consider the API layer. What options do we have? We have Cognito. Amazon Cognito enables you to have scalable, cost-effective login. So if you are building your solution and you don't want to think of how logins will be managed, Amazon Cognito can help to manage federated logins, meaning that your users can connect with any social login. They can connect with their Google login, with their Microsoft login, whatever login So you really do not even have to build the layer. Just use the service, and you can easily configure those logins. And for the actual API, we will use the Amazon API Gateway, which is a very secure, scalable, and efficient way to deploy your APIs. Then let's look at off-chain database and analytics. I earlier on mentioned that off-chain data is as equally as important as on-chain data. And for builders, you need to have that capability to ensure you can capture useful insights from your data, and you should be able to also make predictions. You should be able to harness the full power in your data. So let's see the offerings that can help us. One is Amazon DynamoDB, which is an efficient NoSQL database, fast, responsive for managing data at scale. Then you have Amazon Kinesis for streaming data. Then we have data lake architecture. Then we have Amazon OpenSearch for the search feature of the platform. Then we look at the asynchronous event manager. Okay, let's look at the blockchain nodes. So there are various options for connecting to the blockchain nodes on this application that we are building. We can either use third-party providers in Fura and interact with it using AWS Lambda, or we use Amazon Blockchain Service, which helps us to manage our decentralized blockchain workloads. Or we can actually deploy blockchain nodes on instances, EC2 instances, which we manage. Then for the event manager, we can still use DynamoDB or even use containers to manage that. And for transactions manager and admin wallets, we can rely on the serverless service called the AWS Lambda and key management system, KMS. And ultimately, all of these workloads enables us to integrate with the public Ethereum contracts and wallets. So I'm at the tail end of the discussion. So I have a takeaway from you guys. If you have your phone, you can take the QR code. If you want to try your hands on some of these services from AWS, this QR code will enable you to see an architecture for minting Ethereum-based NFTs on AWS. And if you're interested in the security aspects of what you're building, because security is very important for Web3 startups, we have the AWS Startup Security Baseline and the AWS Security Reference Architecture links on the display, which helps you to dive deep into security recommendations and guidelines from AWS to ensure that you're building and you're harnessing the full power of the world-class security from AWS. And at Amazon, we are data-driven. For every engagement, we like to ensure that we capture useful and necessary data, and this is one of such engagements. So I would appreciate if you can bring out your phone as well and snap the QR code. So it gives you an opportunity to have a say. If there's something you heard that's good, you can give a comment, or if there's anything you'd like to hear next time, you can give a comment. So I'll just give you 10 seconds to do that. Okay. Otherwise, good day, everyone, and Akwaba.
Good afternoon, Mr. John. That's a very wonderful presentation right there. I get to learn a lot that even me using AWS don't know much about. So I don't have a question. My ask is, how do someone get access to AWS credits?
Thank you. And like I mentioned, I mean, it doesn't have to be a question. Let's hear from you. And I think it's very valid. It's actually valid. Before I answer his question, does anyone know the main reason why startups fail? No, I need an answer from this end. Anyone? What's the main reason why startups fail? Exactly, that's the answer. So yes, we do support with credit sometimes. So we have a booth outside there. You can talk to some of my colleagues there. Let's see what they have to offer.
Good afternoon, sir. Firstly want to appreciate the presentation. It is a nice one. Yeah, I'm a novice. I don't even really know about this, but the way you are presenting, I fall in love with it. So I don't know, is there a way we can get the soft copy, probably of your presentation, maybe to learn more, or probably is there any platform put in place for anyone who is interested to learn more about this?
Okay, thank you very much. I would work with the organizers on that, on how they can share the soft copy. Thank you. Yes, anyone else? Remember, I mean, I would appreciate questions, actual questions, but then if what you have is a comment, it's equally welcome, or any perspective. And if you are building anything, it will be good to also hear from you. I mean, your take from your building perspective. So is anyone building actual Web3 platforms here? So we want to hear from you as well. Man in white.
Hi, hello.
Yeah.
My question is, because of the way AWS is charged, you guys charge, it's not really high, it's aggressive. How do you scale an infrastructure like a blockchain that is basically redundancy? Where you have to store multiple forms of information, because we run a streaming service, we run a trading streaming service, and you know how, because we are running on AWS Lambda, it's a Lambda function, so it is impossible to build out a web socket without killing us with cost. So me and my CTO, we have always had to sit down and think about how do we scale AWS a way where we can run a streaming service that is constantly streaming information. So that means the Lambda is always running and is always refreshing. And it's obviously, you charge us per call. I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about. So how do we scale such infrastructure? And on a blockchain service, it's even going to be more expensive. So how does that work?
Okay, great one. So I guess we are speaking about cost optimization on the cloud. So yes, so we have an interesting perspective on cost optimization at AWS. And what we do is that we believe that it is important to work with our users, our customers, to help them optimize their costs. We try to play the long game. We believe that if you're able to optimize your costs, then you'll be able to utilize our services in the long run. So there are various answers to your question. One is that you can work with an architect, to review your architecture for free, yes, and to recommend ways to optimize it. That's one. Another way is that we have the AWS Ask an Expert feature online where you can actually book its slots with an expert, right? Free. Yes, I'm there, yeah. No, it's free. I can give you the URL. Yes. Free, where your architecture can be reviewed and you can have recommendations on ways to optimize. I'm very sure there are opportunities to optimize your architecture.
Okay, thank you very much. I will speak to you.
Okay, mine is a local question on pricing and rates, but not on the aggressive charging, which is one of the reasons why I've stayed away as well. But mine is on exchange rates, which is the other reason why I've stayed away. When you're trying to build a solution on AWS in dollars and you're earning in Naira, in my case, how is that feasible, especially with the exchange? You're in Lagos, so you know what our exchange rate has done over the past few months. So how is this sustainable? Because of that, we've kept an on-premise environment where we manage everything ourselves. The problem is it's hard to find on-premise engineers anymore who can manage a network and and do the DevOps things themselves. So how do you propose we handle that?
Thank you very much. Sir, what's the name? What's the name of your startup? What are you building?
Oh, no, I'm not a startup. We've been around for a while.
Oh,
But the name of the company is Core Software and Systems, and we have a couple of platforms that we build for industry-related services. But because of the aggressive charging, Forex, we've kept everything on-premise at a local data center in Nigeria. But then every so often, people keep on pushing me, why not go cloud? Why not go cloud? And I give them the reasons. Even with the consulting and everything else, how do we get around that?
yes, and very interesting question. And I would say that's the reality for a lot of companies, organizations. And unfortunately, in Africa, we have a lot of problems with our financial systems. And if you've reviewed some of the keynotes we've heard or some of the panel discussions to try to answer some of these naughty issues, if I can call it that. But then one way we help at AWS is that we give companies the option to pay in local currency if they want to pay in local currency. So we have partners that you can work with.
At which rate?
That's
Is it a set rate from one point or local currency based on the current exchange
No,
rate?
I can tell you we are not solving all of the problems, unfortunately. But we are trying to take baby steps. So one way to take the baby steps is that, rather than tell you that we only take USD, baby steps, we are giving you the option to pay in local currency.
Local currency at the current rate. Okay. No problem.
Baby steps.
Hi, Emmanuel here. So I'm playing with Hyperledger Fabric. I build a supply chain visibility platform. And yeah, just like the BMW solution you showed that is able to show full car history, we are able to do the same with supply chain, follow the shipment from origin all the way to destination. Trying to move it away from what it is today, like what you call the SQL environment, into proper blockchain environment. And I have seen a big company fail at that. And it gives me the fear maybe Hyperfabric Ledger is not ready enough for such use cases. IBM had same Hyperfabric Ledger, and they were working with I'll save the name, obvious reasons. And recently they announced that they are shutting down the project for some reason. Now, would you say that there has been a huge success with the use of Hyperledger Fabric when it comes to building full visibility? Now, you understand that there is definitely a difference between that particular tech versus the other blockchain environment, right? That's like a permission list, as it were, where the other guys that are players in there, it's a permission thing. It's not public blockchain, right? Would you say there has been a huge success and use cases either within supply chain environment using that technology?
Okay, great, interesting question. And this question, is not related to cloud. I'm going to answer it. So this is not about cloud platforms. It's not about AWS or any cloud platform. I also happen to be a blockchain architect. So what I would say is this: blockchain, like we say, is not a silver bullet. Blockchain will not solve all problems. We see all sorts of startups, just jumping into blockchain Web3, trying to replicate already existing Web2 deployments, converting to Web3. And we tell them, blockchain is not a silver bullet. So we need to review, what you are building, and we need to be very sure and certain that blockchain is the right call for for what you are building. Beyond the selection of the network or blockchain technology. So the first thing you need to validate is that is blockchain the right approach for the problem statement? Once you verify that, then the next step is to choose the right network. So you need to consider what you're looking at, what you're trying to achieve. For instance, network fees, the speed of transaction, for instance, security, interoperability, and your future direction. So you need to identify what is important to you, what is priority for you, and identify a network that can sustain you in the long run. Don't worry, I can give you some consulting session after this session to further dive deep into what you're building. Alrighty, so let's keep the interaction going. So if you have a question on this session, you can always come up with it. Or if you have a comment, a feedback, or you want to tell us about what you're building, it'll be good to hear from you as well. All right. Yes, looks like it's a wrap-up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much once again. Good day. Akwaba.